So this is the first in the series of these new Improve the Way That You Move videos. Changing the way that I do things. We're not going to have a full practice anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to take different movements that we would usually practice on the floor in a somatic practice and see what happens when we bring them to standing. Really break down the biomechanics of how you move, how you hold your joints and structures, and how that affects the level of tension in your muscles. Because the practice that we're going to do today, pelvic clocks, we do on the floor, and it's fantastic for releasing tension, lengthening through the low back, for rebalancing your pelvis. But what happens when you come back up to standing and you go back to your habitual movement patterns? So this is going to be a really interesting exploration, and it's going to be broken down into several parts. So today's part will be the pelvic clocks on the floor, which those of you who attend class are used to. And then after that, we're going to look at a way to bring it to standing, and we'll break the movement down into several parts, several small classes, which will be delivered in a series of movements to help you understand how your joints and structures move and how they relate to each other. So all of the way from the foot to your skull. So once you can understand how your joints and structures relate to each other, you can start to address imbalance. So if some joints don't move enough, something else is going to have to move more. So if you've been told that you've got hypermobile knees, for example, the chances are that the reason your knees are moving too much is because your ankles and pelvis are not moving enough. So today's video is pelvic clocks on the floor. All of the standing exploration, all of the biomechanics videos will be posted in a group. If you look below, I will post a link to the group. You can join the group, and then you can pick up these movement snacks, these small explorations into how you move. The reason that I'm putting them all in a group is because they'll be presented in a series, and I don't want these videos to get lost in your feed, and I'd also like them to be there for you as a resource whenever you want to pick them up. You'll be able to work out exactly which movement works for you, exactly which movement helps you, and then you can just take that little snippet of information. But it just means that everything's all together in one place. So please join the group. So coming down to the floor. So just allow your legs to lengthen out, arms to rest by your sides. Close down your eyes and just do that quick first check-in. So just take a moment to allow the breath to settle. You could take a few nice, long, slow, deep breaths, and as you exhale, just see what you can release, see what you can let go. Allow your awareness to move inwards. And then just check in with how your body's feeling today. So how has your body arranged itself on the floor? Does one side of your body feel heavier into the floor than the other? Maybe your head feels it's fallen to one side. Remember, this is all fine. This is all information. Nothing more. You don't need to change anything at all. So just checking in with your feet. Has one foot fallen more out to the side than the other? Is one heel more into the floor than the other? So does one leg, one foot feel heavier? Remember, no need to change anything at all. And then allowing the awareness to move up through the backs of the calves and into the knees. And just take a moment to notice the distance between the back of the knees and the floor. And to notice whether this is the same left and right. Notice what you can feel in the knees. How does that relate to the distance between the back of the knees and the floor? Noticing how the backs of your thighs meet the earth or how they don't. What you can sense and feel in the joints of the hips. How much space have you got in the front of the pelvis? How much space have you got in the back? How does each side of your pelvis meet the earth? So once again, just like the heels, maybe one side feels heavier, maybe one side feels lighter, maybe they feel the same, maybe you're not sure what you're feeling. That's all fine. And then allow your awareness to move into your low back as you notice the distance between the whole of your low back and the floor. And then allow it to move out towards the sides of the waist and notice whether there's more space on one side of your waist than the other. And then just quickly checking in with the back of the ribs. How does the left side of the rib cage meet the earth, the right side of the rib cage? Then the tops of the shoulders. What's the distance between the top of the right shoulder and the floor, top of the left shoulder and the floor? And then just noticing the length and weight of each arm into the earth. Then allowing your awareness to move back up. Back past the elbows, back to the top of the shoulders, and from the top of the shoulders, just sensing into the curve in the back of your neck and the weight of your head into the floor. So just take a moment to take that quick snapshot of you laid right here on the floor. Noticing which parts of your body meet the earth, which parts don't. What's long, what's short, how your bones and structures have arranged themselves. Then deepening the breath, bending the knees, bringing the feet to the floor, hip distance apart. Your arms just out to the sides. We're not really going to do anything much with the upper body today. This is a real breakdown and exploration of what's happening in your pelvis. So to start off with, we're going to start with some simple anterior and posterior tilt of the pelvis. You're going to know this as arch and flatten. So as you inhale, I'd like you to roll the pelvis forwards. Your pelvis is going to stay on the floor at all times. This rolling of the pelvis forwards is going to arch your lower back and you're going to sense your tailbone tip down into the floor. See if you can allow your shoulders and your rib cage to relax and release to allow this movement to happen. As you exhale, you're going to release the back into the floor. You're going to roll backwards over the pelvis, and now the top of the pelvis is going to press into the floor. You're going to use your tummy muscles to see if you can press the top of the pelvis into the floor a little more, and your tummy will flatten. The low back will move into the floor. If you want to use the breath, the inhale, breathing into the belly, rolling forwards over the pelvis, tailbone tilts down, low back arches. As you exhale, back comes down into the floor, rolling back over the pelvis, and the tailbone will tilt up, top of the pelvis, low back presses into the earth. So inhaling, rolling forwards over the pelvis. This, if you were standing, would be an anterior tilt of the pelvis. Even here on the floor, it's an anterior tilt of the pelvis. So the top of the pelvis moving forwards. As you exhale, rolling backwards over the pelvis, top of the pelvis now presses backwards into the earth. Posterior tilt of the pelvis. So with your eyelids closed down, I'd like you to just roll through this movement. And I want you to really, really notice what's happening. So does one side of your pelvis lead the movement? Is one side lagging behind? This same side, does it seem to arch more than the other? And when you flatten, that side that was leading the movement and arching more, maybe it's a little less happy to come down towards the floor. Maybe it feels fine. Remember that there's no right or wrong. This is all just information.
So all you're doing here is reminding your brain and nervous system what this movement of the pelvis is, where this movement of the pelvis starts and where this movement of the pelvis finishes. Is that the same place on the left and the right hand sides of your body, or is it different? And if it's different, what do you need to even it out? So if one side is arching more, that side of your body is doing more work than the other. So if you were to think about this in the way that your joints move, the joints on one side of your body are opening and closing more than on the other. More mobility on one side, less mobility on the other. If you think about what's happening to your muscles, that means that the muscles are lengthening more on one side than the other. Can those muscles contract to the same level as the opposite side? And the side that's not moving as well, that contracted side, can they lengthen to the equivalent length of the side that's better at lengthening? So just exploring your own movement, creating your own inner awareness. And notice how it feels when you try and even this movement out, making both sides of the pelvis do the same thing. Both sides of the waist lengthening and shortening equally. It's fine if you need to adjust your ribs, because as you start to move through this, you might realise that in actual fact your rib cage was laid wonky, and maybe you feel that your rib cage is holding you back. So it's perfectly fine to lift your upper body, move your rib cage around, and see if you can balance the movement in the pelvis. So when you've done a few of those, just come to rest. Allow your breath to settle. And just take a moment's awareness. So thinking if our pelvis was a clock, that last movement where you press the low back into the floor and the top of the pelvis tips into the earth, that would be 12 o'clock. And when you roll forwards over the pelvis and your tailbone tilts down into the earth, you've got an arch in the low back, that's 6 o'clock. So now we're going to take a look at the side-to-side movements. It's probably going to be quite difficult for you to see, but I'd like you to just really see if you can get a feel for it in your own body. So you're going to press down with the left hip, and you're going to think about shortening into the left side of the waist. As you do this, can you think about lengthening into the right side of the waist, and your right knee will move forwards in space. The feet stay exactly where they are on the floor. And then can you switch sides? So rolling across the pelvis, pressing the right side of the pelvis down into the earth. Notice how this contracts the right side of the waist. The left side of the waist will lengthen and your knee will move away. Rolling back over the pelvis. Left side presses down into the floor. Left side of the waist shortens, so your pelvis moves up towards your ribs. Your right knee will move away in space. Your left knee will draw back up slightly towards your hip. So switching sides. This should feel like you're walking. One side of your waist lengthening, the other side of your waist shortening. Let your head, shoulders, rib cage just move along with the movement and just notice what's happening. So the weight transferring from left to right. Whichever side of the pelvis is pressing into the floor, that side of the waist will shorten. The opposite side will lengthen. The opposite knee will move away. So just noticing the quality of this movement side to side. Remember, we never move into pain. So you're keeping this movement within your comfort zone, but I would like you to challenge yourself. But if something hurts, dial it right back, make the movement smaller. So if you were standing, this would be an up and down, left and right movement of your pelvis. When you feel done, allow your back to release into the floor. If you feel you need to, you can lift your pelvis off the floor, pop it back down. Take a moment to allow the breath to reset. Take another moment's awareness, moment to notice if anything's already started to change, if anything's different. So noticing how your low back now meets the earth and the length on either side of your waist. Then when you feel ready, we're going to bring in the full movement. So the top of your pelvis, your low back is 12 o'clock. Your left hip is 3 o'clock. Your tailbone is 6 o'clock. And your right hip is 9 o'clock. So when you feel ready, we're going to bring those movements together. Take an inhale before we start. And then as you exhale, press the top of the pelvis and the low back into the floor, 12 o'clock. Roll to the left hip, 3 o'clock. Left side of the waist will shorten, right side of the waist will lengthen. Roll to 6 o'clock. Tailbone tilts down, arch in the low back. Rolling to 9 o'clock. Right hip presses into the earth. Right side of the waist will shorten, left side of the waist will lengthen. Rolling to 12 o'clock. Low back, top of the pelvis presses into the earth. 3 o'clock, left hip presses into the earth, left side of the waist shortens. 6 o'clock, tailbone presses down, low back arches. 9 o'clock, right side of the pelvis presses into the earth, right side of the waist shortens. 12 o'clock, low back presses into the earth. So just keep moving round. We're trying to make a circle. So being really honest and truthful with yourself here. Is this a circle? Or is there a point where your circle becomes jagged? Is there a point where we get a straight line rather than a nice arc? I'd like you to stop in those places and just move backwards and forwards. So just have a play with this movement. Where do you lose control of the movement? So say it was between 12 and 3. You're just going to roll between 12 and 3. Roll back from 3 to 12, 12 to 3. So it could be any part of the clock. And then move on to the next section. So you're looking to make a nice, smooth, controlled circle. Notice what's happening in your knees as you move. You're getting a nice sort of pedaling action. Can you allow the back of the ribs and the shoulders to roll along with the movement? And what's your head doing? Can you allow your head to roll with the movement? And then seeing if you can find a way to switch directions, so going anti-clockwise. So on the exhale, the low back will press into the earth, 12 o'clock. Then you're going to go right hip pressing into the earth. Right side of the waist will shorten, left side of the waist will lengthen. 6 o'clock, moving into the arch. 3 o'clock, left side of the pelvis presses into the earth, left side of the waist shortens. How does it feel to go this way? Is it harder? Is it easier? Maybe there's no difference at all. But once again, just playing with this movement, noticing where the movement might become clunky or difficult, and just seeing if you can smooth it out. If your movement feels fine, see if you can make the movement smaller. How small can you make this movement? And notice when you make the movement really small, what you can sense and feel in your lower abdomen. So you're going to sense it really, really in your core, if it's a tiny movement. And then can you spiral out and make it a bigger movement? So this is your practice, doing what you want. Do what feels right for you. Remember, allow your rib cage, your shoulders and your head to just roll along with the movement. Then finding a way to come to a stop. Press down through the feet, gently lift your pelvis and then slowly lower it back down to the floor. Allow your legs to lengthen out. Allow the breath to settle. And just take another moment's awareness. So just noticing the weight of each heel into the earth. Noticing what you can sense and feel in the back of the calves. Noticing the distance between the back of each knee and the floor. So noticing if anything's changed, if anything's different. Noticing what you can sense and feel in the back of your thighs. How each side of your pelvis now meets the earth. Noticing any sense of space and softness in the front of the pelvis. And then allowing your awareness to move into your low back and just noticing the distance between your low back and the floor. And then allowing your awareness to move into each side of your waist as you notice the distance between the left side of the waist and the floor and the right side of the waist and the floor. Then moving up through the ribs. Do you notice how each side of your rib cage meets the earth? Being curious about the distance between the top of the shoulders and the floor. So although this was a movement for the pelvis and the low back, remembering that all of your joints, structures and muscles are linked. So when you first laid down, if you had an anterior tilt of the pelvis, this will have given you a bigger arch in the spine, which in turn will have lent to more tension through the rib cage and more tension in the shoulders. So just noticing if your body has found a new place to rest, a new place to settle, a place of balance, softness, and a sense of length. Notice how each arm now meets the earth. The length in either side of your neck, the curve in the back of your neck and the weight of your head into the floor. So just taking a learning moment.
So that was pelvic clocks on the floor. Hopefully you've all found some release. And I'd love to see you all in the group for the rest of this series and hopefully many more movement snacks to come. Movement snacks that explore your somatic experience, so that's your mind and body experience, and also bring together an element of biomechanics to improve the way that you move.